Welcome, friends. Here we are planning to revise homeopathic materia medica from Ellen's keynote. And here today, what we are going to discuss is remedy number 165, Spongia tosta. This Ellen's keynote revision has been distributed into following 8 parts. And here the part 1 will deal with the PQR review. PQR, each sentence is taken as peculiar, queer, and rare symptom or red line symptoms. Part 2 will deal with general overview in a classical format. Part 3 will have the quick recall. Within 2 minutes, you will be able to recall the remedy. And part 4 will be mnemonics, acronyms, and rhymes. Here, part 5 will deal with grade 1 symptoms from guiding symptoms of our materia medica, which is the source book of Ellen's keynote. And then we are going to come to part 6. It is going to have the review of first grade remedy rubrics from Kent's repertory. Part 7 will include a clinical correlation with PQRs, or you can say it is a applied part of materia medica. And then last part comes part 8, MCQ review. And here we are going to deal with MCQs which have been already taken up from public service commissions like state public service commissions, UPSC, MD entrance, and other important examinations. So here we are dealing with homeopathic remedy, Spongia tosta. Please remember, its common name is roasted sponge and it belongs to animal kingdom, and its natural order, or you can say family, is Colenterata. The remedy was proved by Dr. Honeyman. Here comes the part 1A PQR review. And as we have been dealing with Ellen's keynote, so the whole text comes from Ellen's keynote, and this is a good study for, especially for BHMSO students, interns, house physicians, and practitioners at large. I am Dr. V.K. Chauhan. So, friends, let us go ahead and see what Ellen's keynote tells us about. This is the text, front page of the text or cover page, which we are going to follow. And this is the total remedy which is represented in this particular small box, which is given in Ellen's keynote. Ellen's keynote, as again I am going to remind you, is the text which is based on Hering's guiding symptoms. This is the source book for this. The text in Ellen's keynote is given in running text. No grades are given. However, please remember that Hering has given 4 grades to the symptoms. And in Ellen's, each sentence represents a PQR, and this PQR may not necessarily be the first grade representation which you will find in Hering's guiding symptom. It can be a 4th grade symptom also. So the selection of PQR is entirely done by Dr. Allen on his clinical uh, review of that particular symptom and usefulness in the practice. So he has a very unique way of picking up of symptoms. So we are studying indirectly Hering's guiding symptoms in a concentrated format through the eyes of Dr. H.C. Allen. The drawback and limitation of this work, what I find is text is disorganized in sequence and continuity, which makes it very difficult for remembering. If you go through the text repeatedly, even then, You will never be able to recall the symptoms in the time when you need it most to recall. Once again, if you go through the text here, what I have given for Spongia tosta in Allen's keynote, you will find that it has got total 16 PQRs. 16 PQRs means 16 sentences which cover up the red line symptoms. Each sentence to us is an idea or red line symptom. So let us go ahead. We go to the first symptom, or you can say first line or first sentence, PQR1, and it tells us for the tubercular diathesis, the analysis of this particular text, it tells us about the diathesis of Spongia tosta. PQR2 tells us especially adapted to diseases of children and women. Light hair, lacks fiber, fair complexion, and comparison is bromium. So this particular rubric, this particular sentence, this particular PQR has two components. One is the physical attributes of a Spongia tosta, the client characteristics, somatic client characteristic, and second is the diathesis. What is the diathesis? Especially for diseases of children and women. We go to PQR3 and it tells us swelling and induration of glands and specifically particularly goiter, and again there is a comparison for bromium. So it is a characteristic particular general. Partially if you recall only goiter, and if you say glands, so glands can be thyroid gland, parotid gland, lymph gland, testes, ovaries. So if we are talking in that reference, so it is a characteristic general symptom. So it has got two components, swelling and induration of glands, it means is a characteristic general symptom. If you take up only goiter, then it is a particular general. PQR4 tells us awakens in the night, awakens in fright and feels as if suffocating, as if had to breathe through sponge. It is not had, it is had to breathe through sponge, and it is a characteristic particular general symptom of respiratory system. We go to PQR5. Every mental excitement increases or aggravates the cough. So again it goes to characteristic particular general, which is respiratory system. PQR6 tells us worse after sleep or sleeps into aggravation like legacies. So it is a characteristic general symptom. General aggravation, it tells us about the spongiatosta. Now we go to the PQR7, sore throat, worse after eating sweet things. So it is a again a modality characteristic particular general which points to the throat. PQR8, again there is a thyroid gland swelling even with chin with suffocative paroxysms at night. So it is again a characteristic particular general symptom which is directly telling us about the thyroid gland. PQR9 tells us again about the goiter, specifically goiter. So there are three PQRs which are dedicated to thyroid gland. It is PQR9, PQR8 and PQR3. Next is PQR10, great dryness of mucous membranes of air passages, throat, larynx, trachea, bronchi, dry as a horn. It is a characteristic particular general symptom, particular symptom of respiratory tract. Friends, we go to PQR11 and it tells us about the cough, dry, barking, croupy, rasping, ringing, wheezing, whistling. Everything is perfectly dry, no mucus rails. So, no mucus rails, there are no wet sounds, there are no crepitations, only rhonchi are present, and this is a characteristic particular general symptom belonging to respiratory system. So, next is PQR12. Here, Ellen tells us about the cough. Cough is dry, sibilant, like a saw driven through a pipe board. Worse, sweets, cold drinks, smoking, lying with head low, dry cold winds. Worse, reading, singing, talking, swallowing. Better by eating or drinking warm drinks or warm things. Again, it is a characteristic particular general which belongs to respiratory system and tells us about the cough of Spongia. Again, we have PQR 13. Croup, anxious wheezing worse during inspiration, and if it is worse during expiration, it is aconite, and it is worse before midnight, worse before morning is hyperself. Again, this rubric or this particular PQR is dedicated to cough only, like we have PQR 11, 12, and this is in series 13. It is a characteristic particular general of respiratory tract. Now comes PQR 14, palpitation. Violent with pain and grasping respiration, awakened suddenly after midnight with suffocation and great anxiety. Valvular insufficiency before and during menses. It is a characteristic particular general symptom belonging to cardiovascular system, and here the heart symptoms are associated with organic disease, valvular insufficiency. So there is a regurgitation, aortic regurgitation, mitral regurgitation, that kind of valvular involvement is there. We come to PQR 15, angina pectoris, contracting pain, heat, faintness, suffocation, anxiety, and sweat, worse after midnight. This is again CVS symptom and it points toward the angina pectoris. So there are two very important organic conditions are there, coronary artery disease and there is valvular insufficiency. These two PQRs 14 and 15 are dedicated here for cardiovascular system. Now there is PQR 16, spermatic cord swollen, painful, testicles swollen, bruised, squeezed after suppressed gonorrhea or maltreated orchitis. So this belongs to characteristic particular general males, but same time please remember the causation is also there. Causation is gonorrhea. Relationship includes we have spongia which follows well after aconite hypersulf in cough and croup when dryness prevails. After spongia hypersulf when mucus commences to rattle, and again we have to compare arnica, causticum, iodium, lacosis, nux moschatus when sputum is loosened but must be swallowed again. So this was the text which comes from Allen's keynote. Hmm. Now, what we are going to have small anamnesis of these particular PQRs based on the classical Hahnemannian or Bonninghausen style segregation. We are going to include PQR 1 to PQR 16 and they are as under. So we find under heading PQR numbers and core points. Under causation, you will find PQR 16 is there. And the causation is suppressed gonorrhea, which leads to orchitis or maltreated orchitis. If you talk about the diathesis, then you will find diathesis PQR1 tells us about tubercular diathesis. And if you talk about the constitution, you will come PQR2, which tells us about the fair, lax, female and children's are the clients for Spongia tosta. We have characteristic generals and PQR5 and PQR6, which tells us excitement which aggravates cough, and there is a general aggravation after sleep. Then we have particular generals, and there are particular generals PQR 12, 13, 14, and 15. They are dedicated to respiratory and cardiac modalities. Midnight suffocation, both condition, whether it is a respiratory or it is cardiac modality. And then we have again particulars, which is going to tell us about the thyroid particulars which are dedicated to thyroid. We have PQR 3, 8, and 9. They tell us about thyroid and goiter. Particular which dedicated to respiratory system is 4, 10, and 11 PQR. And here there is a dryness of respiratory tract, difficulty in breathing with croupy cough. Particulars which are located to the throat, it is PQR7, and here it tells pharyngitis which is worse by sweets, and particular for male is PQR16, which also includes testicular swelling after suppression of gonorrhea. So PQR16 has got two components. One is causation and one is the testicular swelling. So friends, thank you very much for your patient listening. Please remember, sharing is caring. Thanks once again.